At my mom's funeral, my sister laughed at my outfit in front of everyone, calling it cheap and embarrassing. What she didn't know was that I owned the brand stitched inside that dress. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was raining that afternoon in a small Oregon town. The sky hung low and gray, like it was mourning with me. I stood outside the church, holding a damp umbrella, watching people arrive in black coats and quiet shoes. I wore a simple black dress. No jewelry, no makeup, just something respectful. It was my mother's funeral, and I didn't care how I looked. At least, that's what I thought. My sister Tessa arrived late, as always, heels clicking against the wet pavement. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect smirk. She hugged a few relatives, made a show of dabbing her eyes, then spotted me. Her gaze went straight to my dress. "Wow," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. I didn't know thrift stores made funeral collections now. A few people looked away, pretending not to listen. A few others whispered. I felt my face warm, but I didn't say a word. I just smiled a little and straightened my back. If only she knew. The dress she mocked wasn't from a thrift store. It was one of the first designs I ever made, from my own brand, one I had built in secret for years. I'd poured my nights, my savings, and my sanity into creating something real, something mine. But no one in my family knew, least of all Tessa. Inside the church, the air was heavy with lilies and silence. The priest spoke softly about forgiveness, family, and love, words that felt almost cruel considering how far apart Tessa and I had grown. Our mother, Marion, had always adored her more. Tessa was the golden one, charming, social, pretty. I was the quiet one who stayed home, worked late, never quite shining bright enough. As I looked at the framed photo of Mom near the altar, I wondered if she'd still favor Tessa now, even after all this. Maybe. But I didn't let that thought stay long. I focused on the flowers, on the rain against the windows, on keeping myself from breaking down. After the ceremony, people gathered in the church hall for coffee and small talk. Tessa kept her act going, laughing too loud, soaking in the attention. Every time I caught her glance, there was that same smirk, like she was still 12 and I was still the sister with hand-me-down. I stayed quiet, polite, and calm, because while she saw a plain black dress, I knew it was more than fabric. It was proof of who I had become. That moment, her cruel words in a room filled with grief, planted something in me. Not anger, not hate, just resolve. That day at my mother's funeral, I decided I would never let Tessa make me feel small again. When I think about my sister and me, it always feels like two lives that grew from the same root, but bent in opposite directions. We were raised by our mother alone. She worked double shifts at a diner, came home smelling like coffee and fry oil, and still found the strength to check homework and pack lunches. She tried her best, but even as kids, I could feel where her gaze landed with more warmth. It was on Tessa. Tessa was sunshine. Everyone said so. She was the girl who won every ribbon, smiled for every camera, and knew how to charm teachers, neighbors, anyone who looked her way. By high school, she was a prom queen, winning local pageants and collecting compliments like they were owed to her. Our mother glowed whenever Tessa walked into a room, as if she'd built her with her own two hands. I was different. I spent hours in my room drawing, stitching scraps of fabric together, fixing old clothes just to see if I could make them better. I liked quiet things, books, sketching, creating. Mom called it cute but never serious. She used to say, "You're practical, Lena. Leave the fancy stuff to your sister." And I did, because arguing never changed her tone. We grew up in a small house with thin walls. I remember hearing them laugh together while I sat with my sewing kit, pretending I didn't care. Sometimes Mom would call me to take pictures of Tessa in her new dress, and I'd frame the shot, noticing every detail, the shimmer of fabric, the way light hit her hair. I learned more about beauty by watching her than by being part of it. When we left home, Tessa went to college on a scholarship for business and never looked back. She sent photos from parties, beach trips, and fancy events. She started staying in the city with people who owned things instead of dreaming about them. Mom bragged about her constantly, showing off those glossy pictures to anyone who'd listen. I went to community college nearby and worked part-time at a tailor shop. My hands were always busy. Rent was hard. I'd eat noodles and sketch designs on scraps of receipt paper, promising myself that one day I'd turn those lines into real clothes. It wasn't jealousy, it was survival. I wanted to build something of my own, even if no one saw it. Mom never meant to make me feel smaller, but the comparisons chipped away year after year. Every success Tessa had was another reminder that I was the quiet daughter, the one still trying. Whenever I visited, Mom would ask if I had found a real job yet. I'd smile and say I was working on it. By the time she passed, the space between my sister and me wasn't just emotional, it was miles wide. The memories of being overlooked still stung, and that day at the funeral, when Tessa mocked me, it wasn't just about the dress. It was about every moment that came before. That night after the funeral, I sat alone in my small apartment, the black dress folded neatly across my lap. The room smelled faintly of rain and candle wax. I ran my fingers along the hem, feeling the familiar seams, the small uneven stitch on the side that only I would notice. Every thread in that dress carried a memory. I remembered making it months ago, late at night, when the city outside my window was asleep. It was supposed to be simple, clean lines, soft fabric, no tags. I had made it label-free on purpose. I had promised myself long ago that when I finally created something worth showing, I wouldn't attach my real name to it. That decision had started years earlier, after one of Tessa's usual remarks. I still remember her voice from that day, teasing me about my cheap taste, saying that I could never understand elegance if it hit me in the face. I laughed it off at the time, but those words stayed buried in me, quietly growing into something sharper. That night, I pulled out a sketchbook and drew the first design for what would become my secret brand. I called it Marrow. It came from a simple thought. Everything worth building has to come from deep inside, the part people can't see. I registered the company under a made-up name, opened a post office box under another, and kept my identity completely hidden. I didn't want anyone, especially my family, to know it was me. I worked on it for years while juggling small jobs. I saved every extra dollar for fabric and machines. Some nights I fell asleep beside my sewing table with pins still stuck in my fingers. Slowly, piece by piece, it began to grow. A boutique in Portland picked up a few items, then another one in Seattle. One stylist found a coat of mine at a local fair and called it quiet luxury. Orders started trickling in, then flooding. Suddenly, my small workspace couldn't hold the demand. I moved production to a shared studio, hired 2 seamstresses, and kept signing everything under my pseudonym. Even as the brand gained attention, I never stepped into the light. The anonymity was freedom. Nobody could connect the plain, quiet woman from Oregon to the designs worn by women on red carpets. And I wanted it that way. Now, holding that same black dress, I smiled at how far it had come. It wasn't from any store. It wasn't borrowed or bought. It was mine, from the first sketch to the last stitch. And she, my sister, had mocked it without realizing she was insulting something I had built from nothing. I thought about the promise I made to myself years before, whispered while working under a flickering lamp. One day, I'll make her wear my name without knowing it. That thought didn't feel bitter anymore. It felt calm, like the quiet before dawn, when you know something new is waiting just beyond the dark. 2 days after the funeral, I sat across from Tessa in a small office that smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. The rain had stopped, leaving a gray mist hanging over the parking lot outside. Mr. Alden, our mother's lawyer, adjusted his glasses and shuffled through a folder filled with documents. Neither of us spoke. The silence between my sister and me felt heavier than grief. When he finally began reading, his voice was steady, professional, detached. He listed a few small items, some jewelry, a savings account, but when he reached the last page, he paused. "The family home," he said slowly, "is to be passed on to Lena Hart." Tessa's head snapped toward me. "What?" Her voice cracked, sharp and stunned. She leaned forward, eyes wide, as if she hadn't heard right. "That has to be a mistake. Mom would never do that." Mr. Alden shook his head. "These are your mother's written wishes. She made the change 3 months ago." Tessa laughed bitterly, the sound cold and brittle. "Of course she did. You probably convinced her, didn't you?" She turned to me, her tone cutting. "You never even visited. You didn't take care of her like I did. And now you think you deserve her house." I met her glare but kept my voice even. Mom knew what she wanted. She wanted peace. That's all. The lawyer continued, explaining that our mother had written a letter to be included with the will. He unfolded a single sheet of paper, her familiar handwriting slanted and soft. His voice softened as he read her words. She wrote about how proud she was of both her daughters, but that she had come to realize something she hadn't said enough. She admired my persistence, how I had kept going even when no one noticed. She wished she had told me sooner. The words hit me like a quiet wave. For years I had wanted her to see me, not for my success, but simply for trying. Now she was gone, and these were the only words left between us. Tessa pushed her chair back hard, the legs scraping the floor. "So now she suddenly thought you were the good one? Please." She crossed her arms, her tone dripping with anger. "You always played the victim. I was the one who stayed close, who handled everything. You just show up and get rewarded for it." I didn't answer. There was nothing to defend. The truth sat between us in the air, heavy and undeniable. Mr. Alden cleared his throat, saying that concluded the will. Tessa snatched her purse and stood up, her heels striking the tile sharply. "This isn't over," she said, eyes flashing. "I'll get what's mine." I watched her storm out, the office door swinging shut behind her. The echo of it lingered, but instead of anger, I felt an unexpected calm. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I just felt seen. Weeks slipped by quietly after the will reading. The sharpness of that day dulled into something steadier, like a slow burn beneath my rib. I spent most nights in my studio, surrounded by fabric, thread, and the low hum of my sewing machine. Work became my refuge. I didn't want to think about Tessa or the house or the bitterness that still clung to the edges of everything. So, I poured it all into design. Every sketch felt cleaner, every line sharper. It was as if grief and anger had sharpened my hands. Orders for marrow kept coming in. What started as small batches had turned into something much larger. Buyers from a luxury chain reached out, asking if I'd consider producing an exclusive collection. Their email sat open on my screen for a long time before I finally typed yes. I could almost hear my mother's voice then, soft, proud, surprised. I didn't tell anyone about the deal. The company still knew me only by the name Mayro. That anonymity protected me, but it also made the work feel pure. No one could trace my success back to pity or family ties. Every sale, every piece stitched by my hand was mine alone. One morning, my assistant handed me a new request from a charity organization planning a high-profile gala in Portland. They wanted 10 custom gowns for celebrity guests and donors. The event was expected to attract politicians, business figures, and entertainment names. It was a massive opportunity, the kind that could put Marrow on the map permanently. I read through the details carefully, until I reached the bottom of the message. The organizer's name was printed in neat, bold letters, Gavin Pierce. The name made me stop. I remembered the man vaguely from family gossip, Tessa's new husband. Wealthy, well-connected, the kind of man who loved being seen. I hadn't met him yet. Mom had passed before they married. Tessa had sent pictures once, a perfect couple smiling at a vineyard, all white teeth and expensive wine. Now, his signature sat on a document requesting my design. I scrolled further, reading the guest list. There she was, Tessa Pierce, listed among the VIP attendees. I stared at the name for a long moment, my chest tightening in a mix of disbelief and something darker. The irony almost made me laugh. Without hesitation, I accepted the job. Over the next few weeks, I designed gowns with more precision than ever before. Silk, chiffon, tailored edges, each one elegant but understated. I made sure the one marked for Tessa's size was special, not flashy, but commanding in its simplicity. It was the kind of dress she would choose without realizing it carried my signature touch. When the samples were shipped off to the gala committee, I sat back in my chair, staring at the empty table. My pulse was steady, calm. The pieces were out of my hands now, but everything felt aligned. For the first time, revenge didn't look like shouting or chaos. It looked like fine stitching and quiet timing. The moment I had waited for was finally threading itself together. The night of the gala shimmered with gold light spilling through the tall glass windows of the Portland Arts Hall. Cars lined the front entrance, and a red carpet stretched toward the doors where photographers called out names. Inside, a soft hum of conversation filled the air, the kind that made everyone speak a little lower, smile a little brighter. I arrived alone, my name on the guest list as Mayro. No one knew the woman behind that name, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The hall smelled faintly of perfume and champagne. Musicians played gentle jazz near the stage as waiters moved through the crowd with trays of canapés. I wore a simple gown of deep navy silk, one of my own designs, but no one here would recognize it. My job tonight was to observe, to blend into the background and let the moment unfold. Then I saw her. Tessa walked in on Gavin's arm, glowing under the chandelier lights. Her gown, the one I had made, flowed like water, dark and smooth, catching every shimmer from the room. I watched the way she held herself, chin high, shoulders back, perfectly rehearsed. She looked stunning, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that every seam touching her skin had passed through my hand. I stood near the back, pretending to study the art display as she greeted a cluster of guests. Her laughter rang clear across the hall. Custom made, she told them proudly when they admired her gown. From a private designer in Europe. You can't find this anywhere. Her words drew more attention. Heads turned, people nodded with admiration, and my pulse quickened with each compliment. The irony twisted inside me, sharp and sweet at the same time. Watching her boast about something she didn't understand felt almost poetic. She was draped in my creation, carrying my work across the room like a trophy, yet she had no idea I was standing only a few feet away. I drifted toward the refreshment table, glass in hand, pretending to be just another quiet guest. My heart thudded in my chest every time someone mentioned the dress. The whispers floated around, how it was perfect, timeless, flawless. Every word felt like a secret applause meant only for me. While I stood there, I felt someone stop beside me. A man's voice, warm and confident, said, "You have a calm sort of presence. Everyone else is chasing the spotlight, but you," he paused, studying me. "You have quiet elegance. I turned and met Gavin's eyes. He smiled politely, clearly not recognizing me. The moment felt suspended in time. My sister's husband, complimenting me for the very quality Tessa had spent years mocking. I managed a small smile. "That's kind of you," I said softly. He nodded and walked away, drawn back into the crowd where Tessa waited, still glowing in the gown that wasn't European at all. I took another sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue, and let the satisfaction settle deep inside. The evening was far from over, but the stage was perfectly set. The sound of clinking glasses faded as the MC took the stage, tapping the microphone for attention. Conversations softened into a hush. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving the stage washed in soft gold. I set down my champagne flute and straightened my posture, my pulse steady but strong. This was the moment I had built quietly for years, thread by thread, secret by secret. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC began, smiling at the crowd, "we have with us tonight a designer whose work has captured the hearts of so many. Her label, Marrow, has redefined quiet sophistication. Please welcome the founder and creative mind behind the brand, Marrow." A wave of applause filled the room. I walked toward the stage, each step measured, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. My palms were dry. My nerves had turned into focus. The light met my face as I took the microphone. From where I stood, I could see everyone. Gavin near the front, polite and attentive, and Tessa beside him, still glowing in the gown she had boasted about all evening. "Thank you," I began, my voice calm. "It's a privilege to be here tonight, surrounded by people who believe in creation, not just for luxury, but for meaning." I paused, scanning the crowd, letting the quiet stretch. When I began Marrow, I wanted to build something that came from the deepest part of who I am. The name itself was a reminder of that. The marrow is what lies beneath the surface, what holds us upright even when no one sees it. I could hear faint murmurs ripple through the tables. A few heads tilted. Tessa leaned forward slightly, trying to place me, the shape of my face under the light. I smiled, continuing, "Every stitch I've ever made came from a place of being told I wasn't enough, by people I loved, by people who thought they knew better. I learned that when the world underestimates you, the best response isn't anger. It's creation, because when you make something from your pain, it becomes power." The applause began softly, then grew stronger. I kept my eyes on the audience but caught sight of Tessa again. Her expression had shifted, the confusion in her eyes hardening into realization. The way her hand brushed the edge of her gown told me she understood. I didn't need to say my real name. The truth was already unfolding across her face, written in disbelief. Around her, people were whispering, connecting the dots. The dress she had flaunted, the one she claimed came from a European designer, had been made by her sister. I thanked the crowd once more, nodding gracefully before stepping away from the microphone. The applause followed me down the stairs, echoing through the hall. I returned to my seat, the fabric of my gown brushing softly against my legs, the air thick with whispers. Across the room, Tessa sat frozen, the same fabric she had bragged about now feeling heavy against her skin. For the first time, she was wrapped not in pride but in the truth, and that truth had my hands all over it. The night air outside the gala was cool, sharp with the scent of rain still lingering from earlier. Guests were leaving in clusters, their laughter fading as car doors shut and engines hummed away. I stepped onto the stone terrace, letting the chill settle over my skin. The applause from inside still echoed faintly in my ears, but it was fading now, replaced by a low, furious voice behind me. "You planned this," Tessa hissed. Her heels clicked hard against the pavement as she approached. "You made me look like a fool in front of everyone." I turned slowly. Her makeup was still perfect, but her composure was cracked. Her hands clenched around the clutch bag like she wanted to crush it. "I didn't plan anything," I said quietly. "You wore the dress you wanted. Don't you dare act innocent," she snapped, stepping closer. "You knew I'd pick it. You set me up. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? To humiliate me." I studied her face, the anger, the disbelief, the same arrogance that had colored every conversation since we were grown. "You did that all by yourself," I said softly. Her expression hardened. "You think you're better than me now? Because you got lucky with some fabric? You owe me, Lena. I'm your sister. Family deserves a share." The word family hit the air like something bitter. I took a breath before answering. "Family doesn't mock you at your mother's funeral," I said evenly. "Family doesn't laugh while you're breaking." Her jaw tightened. "You always twist things to make yourself the victim." I shook my head. "No, I just stopped apologizing for existing." She scoffed and glanced toward the valet line, where cameras from local press were still flashing. For the first time, she seemed smaller, almost lost. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know," she said quietly, her voice trembling now instead of sharp. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" The question hung between us, heavy with irony. I wanted to remind her how it felt to be laughed at in a room full of people, how those moments never really leave you. But instead, I said nothing. She stepped back, searching my face for something. Remorse, weakness, maybe understanding. "You think this makes us even?" she whispered. "It doesn't. You'll regret this." I met her eyes and saw the same girl from years ago, the one who needed to win every time, no matter the cost. But I wasn't the same sister she used to push around. "I don't regret the truth," I said quietly. For a long second, neither of us moved. The sounds of the city filled the space, the hum of traffic, the low roll of thunder somewhere distant. Then she turned sharply, her heels echoing against the wet stone as she disappeared into the crowd. I stayed there a moment longer, the wind tugging lightly at my hair. The night had stripped everything down to what it really was. Not revenge, not triumph, just the end of something that had been unraveling for years. Weeks moved quietly after the gala, but the ripples it left behind didn't fade. Articles appeared in glossy magazines, blogs, and industry columns, all praising Marrow and its mysterious rise. Reporters wanted interviews, photographs, stories of struggle and success. For the first time, I stopped hiding behind the name Marrow. I signed one press statement with my real name, Lena Hart, and just like that, the secret I'd carried for years belonged to the world. The calls kept coming. Boutiques wanted new collections, investors wanted meetings, and stylists wanted exclusives. My studio filled with light and movement, seamstresses, fabrics, sketches pinned along the walls. The brand felt alive in a way that matched the energy in my chest. There was peace in the work now. It no longer came from hurt, it came from pride. News of Tessa's humiliation spread quietly, but steadily through her social circle. The story of the designer's sister became gossip at dinner parties and whispered conversations. Invitations that once flooded her inbox slowed down, then stopped altogether. Gavin kept a polite distance in public, his smile tight in every photograph. She had always built her image on perception, and when that cracked, the people around her scattered. I didn't take joy in it, not anymore. I just noticed how silence replaced her laughter, how her shadow no longer reached for me. I had spent too many years letting her voice shape the way I saw myself. Now it didn't echo at all. On a gray Sunday morning, I drove to the cemetery with a ribbon folded neatly in my hand, the same black one I had worn on my mother's funeral dress. The grass was damp under my shoes, and the sky hung low with clouds. I found her name carved into the stone, Marion Hart, and knelt beside it. For a long moment, I didn't speak. The breeze tugged at my coat, the sound of wind mixing with distant traffic. I placed the ribbon at the base of the marker, pressing it flat against the earth. "You did what you thought was right," I whispered, even when it hurt me. There were things I wished I could still ask her. If she ever understood how much her approval mattered, if she'd ever seen my work and felt proud without saying it aloud. But the silence between us felt different now, not empty but settled. I let myself forgive her for what she couldn't give. My sister was another matter. Some wounds were better left untouched, their edges too frayed to repair. I didn't hate her, I just didn't need her anymore. I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands, and looked at the ribbon one last time. The black fabric gleamed faintly under the weak sunlight. I smiled, a small, quiet smile that felt like an ending. "You gave me all the fabric I needed," I said softly. Then I turned and walked away, leaving the wind to carry the rest. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of my studio, falling across the framed dress that hung on the far wall. The black fabric was still smooth, the stitching barely visible, the design simple but strong. I'd preserved it behind glass, not as a trophy but as a reminder. It was the dress that had carried me through humiliation, grief, and every hard-earned victory that came after. I kept it there to remember that strength doesn't need to raise its voice. Sometimes it speaks in the stillness of what survives. My studio had changed since those first quiet nights working. Rolls of fabric lined the shelves, sketches pinned in neat rows across the corkboard. The hum of machines mixed with the low murmur of conversation from my team in the next room. There was laughter sometimes, the kind that came from people who loved what they were building together. That afternoon, my assistant introduced a walk-in appointment, a young woman with nervous hands and wide, hopeful eyes. She was about my age when I first started. Her name was Claire, a local entrepreneur preparing to launch her first small business. She wanted a dress for her opening day, something that would make her feel like she belonged. Her voice trembled a little when she said it. I guided her to the fitting area and helped her step into one of the designs from a newer collection. The fabric fell softly against her shoulders, and I crouched down to adjust the hem. She watched me in the mirror, uncertain but curious. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "What if I'm not ready? What if people laugh?" Her words struck a chord deep in me, echoing an old version of myself, one who used to ask the same questions in an empty apartment late at night, needle and thread trembling in her fingers. I looked up and met her eyes in the mirror. "Wear it like you mean it," I said, "and never let anyone tell you it's not enough." She smiled then, a small but genuine one, the kind that carried both fear and determination. When she left, the air in the room felt lighter. I turned back toward the framed dress on the wall. The glass caught a beam of sunlight, and for a second, it almost seemed alive again, the threads glowing faintly in the light. That dress had been my quiet rebellion, born from pain but transformed into proof of resilience. Every success since then had grown from that single piece of fabric and the hands that refused to stop creating. I touched the edge of the frame, my reflection blending with the dark fabric behind. There was no anger left, no lingering bitterness, only a calm sense of closure. The world outside kept moving, the machines hummed, and the dress stayed still, watching over it all. It had started as a symbol of humiliation, but it ended as something far greater, a testament to the strength that never needed to shout. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this wild story. Imagine being mocked at your mom's funeral, only for your sister to find out she wore your brand without knowing it. Crazy, right? Sometimes the best revenge is quiet success. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more real-life twists. See you in the next one. Bye!